we have said already, we're going to be moving into this series. We're starting it, we're continuing it actually, and we're concluding it today. That's entitled Breakthrough. Now, with that thought a little bit in mind, I want to make a little bit of a public service announcement to say that we are moving into a phase of, as a church, that's a mask optional phase. Like that's just that we're, with what's happening with us around our county, and even what's happening with many of you in your lives, that we are moving as a church that if you want to wear it, great. If you don't want to wear it, then that's fine too. It is your option to choose to do that or not do that. And so we want to make that official. We've gotten some questions about it over these past few weeks, but it's entirely up to you. We believe you're responsible. You can make responsible decisions. And so that'll be up to you going forward from here. But getting into this, what we're talking about in Breakthrough, specifically today, we're going to talk about the topic of strongholds. And a stronghold in the biblical sense is something that's often connected with spiritual warfare, very demonic. But what I would say today is that we're gonna be a little lesser on the demonic side of things. We're not going to be quite as dramatic with that particular angle on the topic of strongholds. But the way that we are talking about it, though, as it comes to those strongholds, those things that have a hold of your life, those habits that can often cause great hurt in your life, it can cause great consequence in your life. What we're talking about today does have just as much consequence, destruction, and some of you maybe even know that. And so how do we break free from those strongholds? How do we break free from some bad habits that often can affect us in very negative ways? Like a man I know of named Joe, who was in a street and he had just done what he swore he wouldn't ever do again. And he said some words that he swore that he wouldn't say, but he did say them anyway. He misspoke. And for Joe, it wasn't a thing that, for Pete, it was not a thing that was, it wasn't a thing that just kind of happened to him just by chance or periodically. It was a regular occurrence in Pete's life. He misspoke. And in this particular night, he wishes that he wouldn't have because he hurt a friend deeply. And then there's Joe who can't keep a job. Every job he's tried doesn't seem to work out. He eventually was fired by his family. He found himself in jail because again and again and again, he could not find professional success. That failure had a stronghold in his life. And then there's a woman that I know of who had a marriage, and it was the love of her life, but it didn't work out. And then there was a second marriage that she also thought was promising, but it didn't work out. And then there was a third marriage, the fourth marriage, the fifth marriage. That ended up in divorce. And for her, marital flop is just a very common occurrence. It's not something that she can break free from because it has such a strong hold on her. And so strongholds are somewhat of a regular occurrence in our lives. It's a little different for each of us because some of us can be prone to cheat. Sometimes with our academics, sometimes with our finances, sometimes in our relationships. Others of us are quick to doubt. We just have an air of cynicism that's always about us. It's not just with matters of faith, but it is about matters of faith. And then it moves on into every aspect of life in which someone tells you something, you just don't believe them. There's always an air of doubt about every piece of information you receive. Then there's a tendency to always worry. And we all worry to some extent. We live in a very unsettled world that naturally is going to feed some worry into our lives, but you've got this market cornered. And worry is something that wakes you up at night. Worry is something that debilitates you. It paralyzes you. And so that's your tendency. Or maybe you're even swift to judge. And by that I mean the judgments that you offer people are you looking down on them. You did some things right. And now it's created an air of you being better than others. You're swift to judge. And maybe you're aware of that. Maybe you aren't. But that is a thing that could have a stronghold on you. Or maybe for you, it's an explosive temper. Perhaps it's a fragile self-image, a freezer-sized appetite, a distrust of authority. What is your stronghold? We all have something like that in our lives that has a hold of us and it won't let go of us, and we need a breakthrough as it relates to that thing in our lives. We're here. God wants us here. He's wanting us to be on mission for Him. He's wanting us to be on purpose for Him. He's wanting you to have sleepful nights. He's wanting you to not be debilitated and paralyzed by worry in your life. He's wanting those things for you so that you can go into the world and live more and more for Him. But you got to have the breakthrough. I've got to have that breakthrough from the stronghold in my life. Let's define our strongholds just this way, pretty simply, as an old, difficult, discouraging challenge that is there for you, that you wish would go away, but for whatever reason it won't. Now, in this series, we've been looking at the life of David, and we've gone through his early years, and we're up to the point where he's just become king, but he's become king of a broken kingdom. He's become king of a nation that's very divided. They need a strong leader, but you know what else they need? They need a united kingdom. And the only way to get the United Kingdom is that his headquarters, his central place of operation, has to be in the middle of that particular territory that they all reside in. And right now, he's far too south, so David has his eye on one city, one stronghold that is an old, difficult challenge for the Israelites. It's Jerusalem. Now, we know of Jerusalem as the place the prophets spoke, Jesus taught, Jesus healed, the temple was built. But 1,000 years prior to that, that wasn't the case. The Jebusites indwelt Jerusalem. It wasn't God's people's city. It was the Jebusites. And no one messed with the Jebusites because no one could take Jerusalem. The walls were too tall. They were too thick. The challenge was too great. The stronghold was too strong. So the Amalekites fought the Philistines fought the Israelites fought the Amalekites, but no one messed with the Jebusites because no one could take down Jerusalem. And that was David's stronghold that he had to break through on. And let's see how that goes, how that plays out. And this is a very short but incredibly significant story in David's life. The king and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites said to David, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." In other words, you could put someone up here who is disabled, who can't see, who can't hear, who can't talk, and they will still keep you from taking this city. Major trash talk. And they thought, David cannot get in here. Nevertheless, David captured the stronghold of Zion, which is the city of David. And on that day, David had said, anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind, who are David's enemies. David then took up residence in the stronghold and called it the city of David. And so he conquers this stronghold. Two instances in this passage, you see that David took on the stronghold and David dwelt in the stronghold. He conquered. He had a breakthrough. But what was the progression there? Often it's the same progression that we go through when it comes to these types of strongholds in our lives. You'll notice there that there were people who were mocking him. Going back to the text here, it says, "You'll never get in here, David. Even the blind and the lame could keep you out." And so David saw this thing that he wanted to get to. He saw the city that they needed to have. Do you even know what that is? Well, what is that thing that is holding you back? What is the stronghold in your life? And he realized it. He wanted to take it. And yet there were mockers who were there. Inevitably, they will always be there. There will be your critics. They will be the ones who will keep you from taking the stronghold, keep you from getting where God wants you to be. They are present voices, and they might even be past voices who say things like, "You'll never overcome your bad habits. Born white trash, gonna die white trash. Think you can overcome your addiction? Think again. You are an idiot." And sometimes these voices are people. And sometimes they're ourselves. It's psychologists say that negative thought loops, negative self-talk is one of the most destructive behaviors we can have in our lives. And sometimes they're people who know better, who should do better, but they don't. When I was 13 years old, I had an encounter with a woman that was like this. We shared a property with her. We rented a house that was next to a house that she owned. But unfortunately, it was a scenario in which my mother, a single mother, was not able to pay the rent for a period of time, and it created great tension. And so we were behind on the rent by a few months, and the tension had grown and grown and grown. And then there's one day that I came back to the house we were living in. and the door was locked. I couldn't get in. Well, I needed to get in, or otherwise I was locked out. Nobody else was there. Was I just going to stay outside? And so I thought to myself, well, I'll just go to her. I'm 13 years old. I'll go to her, the woman who owns the house. Maybe she'll let me in. I don't know if my mom and her had much of a conversation over the past few weeks, past month or two, but I could tell she had a lot to say when I opened the door, when she opened the door after I knocked on the door. And so I knock on the door, she opens it, I ask her if she'll let me in, and immediately she just explodes. I've never seen someone who is supposed to be mature, older, and adult act like that. I'd never seen that in my life. And she just exploded on me. And she just went off about how I wasn't anything, we were losers, we should go back to the projects. And she just went on and on and on, just tearing me apart. This 13-year-old kid. She should have known better. She should have been better, but she wasn't. Now, she was older. She was probably a little senile. She definitely drank too much. And all of that came crashing down in that particular moment. And I had a choice. And I remember just sitting there for however long I had to sit there until somebody finally showed up to let me in. I remember having a choice in my mind. I said, I'll either believe what it is that she just said about me, or I won't. Now, in that moment, she really wasn't close enough to me that I really cared. And so I kind of knew she was crazy, and I knew that wasn't anything that I was going to hang my hat on what she just said. But some of you have had people say things to you who should have known better, who are much closer to you than that woman ever was to me. People who should have been lifting you up, but they were tearing you down. And you're trying to accomplish something, you're trying to become something, you're trying to get to where the Lord wants you to get to, and they did not have a good word for you. It was a bad word. But in this story, there is a word that we need to come back to that is a very defining word, not just for David, not just for Christians, but for all of us if we were willing to embrace it. And what is the word that you need? What is the word that I needed? Nevertheless. No one can take Jerusalem. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold. It is in the midst of the nevertheless that we find God's mercy, God's grace, God's compassion, and God's love. It is in the midst of the nevertheless that no matter how far we have strayed, no matter how addicted we are, no matter how far into the far country we have gone, there is a nevertheless that is there for us, that is a breakthrough to take the stronghold in our life if we're willing to embrace the nevertheless. Your faith, your life in following Jesus is defined by a word like this, if you allow it to be. Like the man who once said, I once was blind. But he could have said it. Nevertheless, now I see. And maybe you have a story like that. I know of people who have stories like that. Born to alcoholics, nevertheless, she led a sober life. Never went to college, nevertheless, he mastered a trade. Did not read the Bible until 60, nevertheless, he came to a deep and abiding faith. Grew up in a broken home, nevertheless, is happily married. And it is God's power in the nevertheless that breakthrough is experienced, and you get from here to there with God, and the strongholds are broken. The Bible says it this way, that we use God's mighty weapons. You see, we come at our problems with toothpicks, but God comes at them with battering rams. And so we use God's mighty weapons, not mere worldly ones, to knock down the devil's strongholds in our life. And what we have to believe today is that what God did for David, he can do for us. That in the same way God helped him to tear down his stronghold, he can help us to break through and break down our strongholds. And how did he do it? Well, there were two things that happened in the story. It was a short story. I wish there was more to the story. But what do we see there? First thing that David did was he turned a deaf ear to old voices. That there were those around him that criticized what he was trying to do. They didn't believe that he should do what he was trying to do. There shouldn't be a breakthrough there. The Jerusalem shouldn't be taken, but it was taken. But he had to turn a deaf ear to those who were standing on top of the wall, shouting down and mocking him. It's kind of like the story of a company called Airbnb. How many of you have ever stayed at an Airbnb? Many of you, many of it. A lot of they have completely disrupted and revolutionized the vacation industry. Airbnb. One of the best podcasts that you can listen to is a podcast that talks about how companies were built. And so in this podcast, they did the story of Airbnb. And this is a very worldly example of what we're talking about, but I'm going to make the point here in a moment. And so two men launch Airbnb in San Francisco because they need to make a little extra money. So they purchase 3 airbeds, and then they promise anyone who stays on the airbeds, because there was a conference in town, all the hotel rooms were booked up, anyone who stays on one of their airbeds will get breakfast. They get an airbed and breakfast. Airbnb. Now you know what that means. So the 3 air mattresses were immediately reserved, and quickly these guys realized they were onto something. So then they launched some operations in New York City, and it began to become more and more successful. And they followed around the conventions and the conferences because that was generally when all of the hotel rooms were booked up. Well, with any successful company, there's a lot of expense that follows. Eventually, these guys found themselves with $20,000 in credit card debt, and they didn't have enough income to keep paying the payments that they needed to pay. And so they came up with a very ingenious idea of how they were going to pay off the credit cards, keep the company going long enough to get some investors. What was their great idea? Well, they looked at the presidential election, and they decided to sell cereal. Specifically, Captain McCain's and Obama O's. And it is the cereal here that had been repurposed in these boxes that they had made that they were able to make over $20,000 to pay off the credit card debt and give them enough cash flow to keep the business going until Halo investors swept in and were able to launch Airbnb to give them their breakthrough that they were able to have today. But that didn't happen without quite a bit of criticism. Quite a bit of people doubting what it was that they were doing, telling them that a non-brick and mortar business venture will not make it. And this is what the founder said just recently. He said, a number of people have said that Airbnb is the worst idea that ever worked. Or at least I can say, everyone at the time seemed to say it was the worst idea. And it worked. So maybe that's the nice connection. That wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have gotten to where they are now if they weren't willing to turn a deaf ear to their critics. If you're constantly accommodating the people who are criticizing you and are coming up against you, you'll never have enough emotion, finances, time to make any difference, to do anything that the Lord really wants you to do. 500 years after David received his mocking from the Jebusites, there was another person on those walls. His name was Nehemiah. And as Nehemiah was seeking to rebuild the city of Jerusalem, he too faced his critics. He was trying to reestablish this city where God's people had once resided. And so they're criticizing him. They're trying to pull him down off of the wall. They're making up stories about him. And this is the message that he sends to them. I'm doing a great work up here so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave and go down to you? He wasn't going to listen to those people who were speaking out against what he knew it was that God wanted him to do. And then you fast forward 500 more years to another man. We all know who he was and is. Jesus. He's in the wilderness. Satan comes to him. He tempts him in 3 different ways. Jesus doesn't even acknowledge the temptations and simply responds with 3 different instances of Scripture. On another instance, he's telling his disciples that he has to die. And then how does his disciples respond? Well, Peter steps forth and he says, I'm not going to let it happen. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. And then on another instance, some people come to Jesus and they say, Jesus, our daughter needs to be healed. She's sick. And as Jesus is going to heal this daughter, some other people come and say, well, she died. And Jesus said, no, she didn't die. She's asleep. But the people laughed at him. And what does Jesus do to his critics and his naysayers, the people that get in the way of him doing what it is that God wants him to do? He silences them. He actually kicked them out of the room whenever he arrived at the house where the girl was. After the crowd had been thrown out of the house, Jesus went into the girl's room, and I just see them kind of peeking through the side of the door, maybe under the door, and they're seeing what's going on in there, and all of a sudden where there were 2 feet, there are now 4. Because he wasn't going to listen to the people, the voice that was going to keep him from doing what it is that God wanted him to do. To have the breakthrough that God wanted him to have. To tear off any stronghold that was there. And we all have that choice. 2 voices. There's one of the world and there's one of the scriptures that says, yes, you can, or no, you can't. God will help you. God has left you. God is strong. You are weak. This is the promises of the Bible, and these are the promises of the world. And you have a choice, and I have a choice from this rhetorical question. Why listen to the voice of mockers when you can listen to the voice of God? The second way that David broke the stronghold is that he looked for new choices. You see, when people would come upon Jerusalem, they just saw the tall walls. They tried to come up with a variety of different ingenious ways to break the wall, to scale the wall, to get over the wall, but it never seemed to work. And what did David do? On that day, David had said, anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind who are David's enemies. You see, David grew up in Bethlehem, just a short distance from Jerusalem. David had hid in the caves of En-Gedi. David knew the terrain better than anyone, and where people saw walls, he saw tunnels. He said there's an option, there's a choice that no one has ever tried to take advantage of, and I know it's there. And if we're going to get Jerusalem, if we're going to get this stronghold, we have to use the tunnel. People saw what they wanted, but they didn't know the option, the choice that was there for them to get it. That's how it is with strongholds. That we know our marriage could be better, could be more loving. We know our faith could be more vibrant. We know our careers could be more fulfilling. We see walls. But David saw tunnels. And he realized that there was another option, an option that God was bringing forth that others had not. And that was what was going to help take the stronghold down. So there's 2 kinds of often things that we struggle with. The first is we'll struggle with temptations that come our way. And they often can get the best of us. And you know what that is for you. I don't know what it is, but you know what it is for you. And in those particular instances, the Bible has promised us that no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. I don't know what that is for you. And you might already be asleep. I don't know. But hopefully you'll wake up here and realize that there's something messing up your life right now. And it's right in here. And you don't think you can deal with it, but God wants you to help you to deal with that because it's going to destroy your life. But he is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But the temptation he will provide, he's also going to provide you with a way to escape that you may be able to endure it. There's always a tunnel. Maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's a text message, maybe it's an email, maybe it's a knock at the door. Maybe it's a thought. Maybe it's some responsibility that you need to fulfill. Whatever it is, God will provide you with a way out. You just have to choose, will you take it or not? It's very miraculous. I had a friend of mine who made a very poor decision. And that poor decision would actually define and ruin the next decade of his life. And after making this decision and beginning to deal with all the consequences that came as a result of what it is that he did that was unethical and illegal, he said, Phil, the unbelievable thing is that God kept giving me a way out. I just never took it. In his mind, he had a choice. Did he want to do this or not do this? But all along the way, God was giving him a way out. And the way out was his cousin who never called him. And he said, on this particular day, I'm driving around with this guy who's incredibly sketchy. He's the one that got me going down this wrong path. I'm driving with him. And my cousin calls me like 6 times that day. I talked to him once, and he wanted me to come to his house. And I kept avoiding his calls after that. I kept avoiding. And if I would have just gone to my cousin's house that day, I wouldn't have done what I did. That ultimately caused him to spend time in jail, years of probation officer meetings, court time, attorney fees, and you can go on and on and on with all the consequences. God gave him a way out. He just chose not to take it. And there are those miraculous moments when God will do that. There are also those manufactured moments that will keep us from allowing the stronghold to get the best of us, to where there can be a breakthrough, but it's another choice. It's something that maybe we don't think that we should embrace. It's something like this. I know of an unmarried couple. They sought accountability from a very mature older couple. They wanted to wait on sex until they were married. And so they gave this mature couple the opportunity to call them at any point in time and check in on how they were doing with their purity. That's another choice. People see walls and they saw a tunnel. An alcoholic gave his friends, I know of, permission to punch him in the face if they ever see him with a drink. Now, I don't know if it completely made him stop drinking, but it definitely made him drink less. I know of a woman who countered her anxiety by memorizing scripture because she was so focused on her problems that she was forgetting about the promises. So she wanted to stop focusing on the problems and focus more on God's promises. And she did that by memorizing scripture. That's the tunnel. That's the third choice that we don't often see. I know of a traveling sales rep who removes the TV from his room so he isn't tempted to watch inappropriate movies. I know of a man who grew tired of his prejudices, so he moved into a minority neighborhood and he made new friends. It's that option, that choice that we don't often see, but it is there. We focus on the wall. God's providing us a tunnel. Are we going to walk through the tunnel to take the stronghold? And David knew there was a hole under the city that he could get in through to take the stronghold down. And not too far from there was another hole that wouldn't save David and allow him to take Jerusalem. But it was a hole that would allow us to break all of our strongholds. Because in that particular hole, Jesus was placed. And it's there that we see the power of God displayed as Jesus Christ was raised from the grave. And that wasn't necessarily a hole that we had to go into, because it was a hole that he came out of. And we focus on, the world can focus on walls when we have Jesus who rose from the grave. And it is that power that can push you through the stronghold, push you through the barrier, the stronghold that's keeping you from the breakthrough that God is desiring for you. God's power is very great for us who believe. That power is the same as the great strength God used to raise Christ from the dead and put him at his right side in the heavenly world. And so, how did David take down the stronghold and experience the breakthrough? He turned a deaf ear to old voices, and he opened his eyes wide to new choices. You remember our friends at the beginning? They eventually had breakthrough. Pete, who couldn't speak well, he figured that out. We know of him as Peter. And in Acts chapter 2, and really throughout the rest of the book of Acts, Peter doesn't misspeak anymore. And instead, because of what God has done for him and the spirit that God put in him, there was a stronghold that was broken in his life, and he was able to speak in such a way that 3,000 people came to faith in Jesus Christ, and the Lord added to their number daily from that day forward. Now, that's not something that happens from someone that can't speak. That's something that happens when God breaks them through to speak in only a way that God can. Or our friend Joe, who couldn't keep a job. His family didn't want any part of him. He was imprisoned. We know of him as Joseph. And it was all those difficulties along the way that would have made everyone think God is, not with you. But yet through it all, we're reminded in the book of Genesis that God was with him. And eventually he was promoted to the modern day equivalent of the prime minister of Egypt. And then there was the woman. We know of her as the woman at the well, who after 5 divorces, she's living with her boyfriend. Jesus stepped into her life. He changed her life. She became the first missionary of Jesus's to go into Samaria and tell others about him. And then there was Jesus, who was placed in a tomb. People thought all was lost. and yet God rose him from the grave. God's mighty weapons knocked down the devil's stronghold. And so we have Peter who misspoke, Joseph was in prison, the Samaritan woman was divorced 5 times, Jesus was dead in a grave. Nevertheless, Peter preached, Joseph ruled, the woman shared, and Jesus rose. Nevertheless. And so what about you? Is there a nevertheless that you need to experience, that you need for your breakthrough? We all do. And my prayer is that you will surrender in a way that you will embrace that nevertheless, to put a deaf ear to the old voices, to embrace the new choices, and experience all the love that God has for you, and to get from here to there with him. And every week, in the time of communion, we remember our nevertheless, that God so loved the world, that he gave his one and only Son, that who shall ever believe in him will not perish, but have eternal life. That while we were yet sinners, nevertheless, Jesus Christ died for us, and God demonstrated his love to us in that. And so in this time of communion, we take the juice that represents his body, and the bread, that cracker there that represents the juice that represents his blood, and the bread there that represents his body that was broken. And in this moment, we remember the love that he displayed to us in Jesus. We remember the nevertheless that's available to us all. Let's pray, and after we pray, we're going to have a time of worship and an opportunity for you to respond to to some of our leaders that we'll have available on the side of our room. And it's there, they'll be available to pray with you if you want to pray with them. But it's in this time that we encourage you to remember the nevertheless that God has given you in Jesus. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you. We have maybe got critics in our lives. Maybe we are our own critic, and we are keeping ourselves from experiencing, Lord, what you would have for us. Help us to turn a deaf ear to that. Father, we come before you realizing that we may not see the tunnel that you have before us. Lord, open our eyes, open our hearts to that option that is there. Help us to embrace it. And we thank you for the neverthelesses that are always available in Jesus' name. Amen.